Kids for Cash back then, the House of Horrors now in Wilkes-Barre, other things happening, you know. But Hugo Selenski case still has this appeal. And I don't mean that in a good way. I'm not endorsing Hugo Selenski, but it still has an appeal. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's the area. You don't really see too many high-profile cases around here, especially homicide cases. You know, thank God. But you know, everybody, 1982, George Banks, people still talk about
Right.
that. Glenn Wilsifer, 1986.
Joanne Curley,
Yeah, Joanne Curley.
Valiant poisoning.
Yep. So you get those cases once every in a blue moon that just stands out, and Hugo Selenski is one of them.
Right. And you know, it's interesting, and I've heard the comment made. Joey and Alex, let me know if we have to break. 5 minutes left in the show? Okay. That, and there's a term, and it may be in the Bible, I'm not a Bible expert. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So you see a lot, I hate to say it from covering crime for all these years. If somebody is a drug dealer and they're involved in that crew or this certain clientele or lifestyle, you don't want to see anybody hurt or killed. That's not what I'm saying. But the chances are you're going to get hurt if you're in that lifestyle. If you're living by the sword, you might die by the sword. But here you have Tammy Fassett, totally innocent. Michael Krakowski, by all accounts, a good man, hardworking guy who got, through his family connection, connected to Selenski, and they pay the horrible ultimate price because of that. Do you think that's part of it also? The collateral damage? I mean, just the innocence.
Well, yeah, Tammy was certainly an innocent victim here, and so was Michael too. He was a target of a crime, of course, a brutal crime with flex ties. The way Michael and Tammy were killed was just barbaric. You know, usually, and the district attorney knows this from all the homicide cases he's prosecuted. But usually, when somebody kills somebody, there's some type of known factor there. You know, it's an acquaintance, maybe relatives, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, but there's always an acquaintance. Here with Tammy, she never met Hugo. She was an innocent victim here.
Go ahead, Sam.
I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention all the people that were involved, and all of them, I think, by name appear in Ed's book. But, you know, this case started being prosecuted by attorneys Jim McMonigal and Chris O'Donnell, and I joined that first team, you know, to assist them. And then it went on to then District Attorney Dave Lupus, his first assistant Jackie Carroll, their deputy Dave Pedry, who later becomes the county manager. Then when Stephanie takes over, it goes on to myself, Jarrett Ferrantino, Mamie Phillips, and Luke Moran. So those are just the prosecutors, and there were probably more than that. So Detective Capitano, who broke this case wide open with Jerry Sackney, God rest Gary's soul, passed away not long after he retired. But if he doesn't follow up on reports of a burglary that a lot of people might ignore, we may never discover these bodies and never know what happened to Krakowski and Fassett.
Yeah,
It's thanks to all those people and Chief Belavage and all the Kingston Township guys. And, you know, this was by no means one person, you know, being heroic. This was absolutely a team effort. And, you know, we thank some of our leads even came from the media. So, you know, we got information by seeing something reported and knowing somebody we could follow up with. And we continued to get evidence, I mean, almost up until the day of that second trial.
Yeah, I think the ball got rolling on this from Detective Capitano doing a favor for a friend.
100% true.
And that's how this was discovered. Detective Capitano, who was the lead investigator with Trooper Sackney, he was doing a favor for a friend of a burglary turned robbery.
Right. And Gary Capitano, again, God rest his soul, I did a lot of stories with him. He was, again, a gumshoe detective. You talk about, when I say 1930, 40 style with the trench coat and stuff, that was Gary. And other people, you know, Mike DeSoy. These are the old school detectives.
Former U.S. Marine.
Pardon me?
Capitano, he was a former U.S. Marine.
Yeah. He was just, and again, from a media perspective, he wasn't the kind of guy you get a wink and an eye like, hey, follow me. He kept it close to the vest. And way you should, actually, obviously, but he was just really great to work with. And just after all these years. So Selenski, we have about a minute left. He's still in prison, 2 consecutive life terms. Have you heard anything about his status at this point? Not that we care, right, folks, but what's the status of him? Just in prison?
Yeah, he's serving 2 life sentences plus 200 and some years for the other crimes for which he was convicted. I actually don't even know where in the state he is right now.
All right, have to wrap it up. I really appreciate your time, Luzerne County District Attorney Sam Sangaldoci, and Times leader, reporter, and author of Hugo's Graveyard, Ed Lewis. Thank you. I really appreciate your effort, and we're doing these programs because people are still talking about, but also to show that there's people that care about and do hard work and do good things, and I think that came out in this case. Took a while, but persistence paid off. So
Thanks, Andy.
okay, Sam and Ed, thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.
I'm Andy Mehalshick. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you next time here from the 2822 News Stream Center. Have a great day. See you next time.
Future Alert weather isn't just your forecast, it's your ultimate advantage. Accurate,
And welcome to 2822 News Podcast. I'm Andy Mehalshick, lead IT reporter here at 2822 News, which is WBRE TV and WYU. My special guest today is Wyoming County District Attorney Joe Peters. Our topic today is a crime that many say the victims hide or are hidden in plain sight. We're talking about human trafficking. And I'll be honest with you, right from the outset, up until about 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't realize how big of an issue it is, how big of a problem it is, and what kind of a challenge it is to investigate human trafficking all across the nation, but especially here in northeastern and central Pennsylvania. First of all, Joe Peters, always great to have you on in any capacity here at 2822 News. Welcome here today.
Thank you, Andy. It's good to be here.
And Joe, you're very involved in the Northeastern Pennsylvania Human Trafficking Task Force. There have been different events. You've also investigated on an individual basis as a prosecutor in Wyoming County. First of all, at the outset, because we're going to run some stories on it also for some background, but what is human trafficking and how big of an issue is it in Northeastern Pennsylvania?
Human trafficking is an issue everywhere. You mentioned the word hidden, which is so key to this, because whether you consider it a crime hidden in plain sight, or whether you consider it a crime in the darkness, hidden in the darkness, it exists everywhere. Our challenge in law enforcement and beyond is awareness and education first. We in law enforcement know the crime exists, but the public doesn't. And over time, we have lots of criminal challenges like this. You know, years and years ago, 40, 50 years ago, no community wanted to admit that it had a gang problem because that was not a good thing. It wasn't a good thing for the school district. It wasn't a good thing for the Chamber of Commerce. So there's a tendency to stick our heads in the sand and pretend it's not there, especially when you can't see it overtly. Drug trafficking you can see on a corner. Human trafficking is in the shadows, and that's our first challenge is education and awareness. And actually, you also mentioned a task force. There are two task forces. There's a broader Northeastern Pennsylvania task force against human trafficking. And I say broader because it represents not only law enforcement, but also teachers and psychologists and victim service providers and all of those people from the community and various organizations that can impact this problem. So that task force exists in probably 9 counties now in northeastern and central Pennsylvania. Separately, there's the law enforcement task force, and I co-chair that task force. And that is headed by the Department of Homeland Security because we want to bring the big guns in, the expertise and the resources and the intelligence. But it also consists of federal prosecutors, DAs, state prosecutors, Pennsylvania State Police, local police, all focusing on the human trafficking organizations.
Now, you mentioned the Department of Homeland Security. We're going to run a piece done by one of our reporters back in 2023 about you guys held a big news conference with the feds, state and local police. Allison and Gabby, if we could run that piece from 2023 talking about human trafficking.
On Wednesday, officials from Homeland Security Investigations and law enforcement leaders from across northeastern Pennsylvania came together to announce the implementation of the Wyoming Valley Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation Task Force.
This task force is about protecting our children from the heinous, in the shadows, human trafficking, child exploitation, sex offenses, predators and trafficking on the internet.
Experts say human trafficking and child sexual exploitation doesn't just happen in big cities. It can also happen here in the Wyoming Valley due to its centralized location between Philadelphia and New York and its high volume of hotels. Experts also say that trafficking and exploitation can take many different forms.
The ugly face of human trafficking can often be a young girl whose mom and dad think she's at cheerleading practice when she has been groomed by a predator, a human trafficker, part of a larger organization.
The task force aims to identify and prosecute these crimes and inform parents and schools about the signs. It also seeks to help victims heal from trafficking and exploitation.
It's equally as important to make sure that we're shepherding the victims of those crimes through the recovery process so that they're getting the help and the social services that they need to survive their trauma and get their lives back on track.
Officials say a working relationship between HSI special agents and the Wyoming County District Attorney's Office has been in place for over a year. With this official implementation, the task force will be able to expand into surrounding counties across northeastern Pennsylvania.
Information sharing, continued teamwork meets with aggressive investigation and prosecution. And together we can and we will continue to make a difference in the community.
In Tunkhannock, Wyoming County, Amelia Sack, 2822 News.
Okay, Joe, you know, we're talking about the victims of human trafficking, and that was pretty comprehensive, the sense of urgency with the problem. When you talk about human trafficking, how does that come about? How does it happen and why can't people get out of it? Just, I know it's a really broad question, but when you say human trafficking, we heard of a sexual nature, but it could take different forms, correct?
It can take many forms, and actually human trafficking takes two broader forms. One is sexual trafficking and exploitation, but labor trafficking is also a big issue. You know, you have people that get smuggled across the border, the Mexican border, by cartels. They don't have the money to pay that $5,000, $7,000 fee. So they agree, they're duped into thinking they're coming to this nirvana, which is what their life will be in America. They agree to work it off once they come here. What they don't know is they're going to be enslaved probably for most of their life, quote, working off through labor trafficking this debt. The other trafficking is sexual. People are typically manipulated into it. You know, there's a misnomer, Andy, that people, and this is one of our challenges, people think of human trafficking as that famous white van that drives down the street and literally kidnaps or captures a young girl and takes her away, and she is never seen again. That happens. That's the face of human trafficking to so many people, and it's perpetuated by movies and stories. And yes, it happens in Asia. It happens in Taiwan. It happens, yes, in San Francisco, in New York. But because it doesn't happen here that way, people think, we don't have a problem like that. Why do I need to care about it? Well, the face of human trafficking, as was mentioned in that piece that we just saw, is often this understated and subtle grooming of a young girl to the point where she is willing or forced or extorted by an older man into performing sexual activity after school. For a number of guys, let's say from 4 to 6 p.m., mom and dad think their daughter's at gymnastics because their daughter is home at 6 p.m. having dinner across the table, not knowing anything has happened or transpired in those last 2 hours. So that's the face. And how does it come about? It's a 40 or 50-year-old guy who creates a fake persona on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram. And he looks for those vulnerable young girls. And when you're 12 or 13 or 14, what do you want out of life? You want to be popular. You want people to think that you're pretty. You want to be invited to parties. You want to wear makeup. And I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but a young girl, and I say girl because she's not a woman, isn't emotionally developed yet. So she's struggling with all those things. So this predator, who's really 50 years old, steals a picture of a 20-year-old male, creates that as his social media identity, looks for and swoops down upon that young, insecure girl, and he grooms her. And over weeks, sometimes less, he tells her how beautiful she is. inside and out. He tells her he understands, and her parents don't understand her. He tells her, I don't know why your parents won't let you wear makeup. So what does he do? He befriends her. Eventually, over those days and weeks, he owns her emotionally. And then he says things to her like, you know what? I'm going to get a post office box, and I'll hide the key under a rock outside the school. And here's the box number. I'm going to send you that makeup because you deserve it. I'm going to send you a cell phone in case your parents are monitoring what you're doing. And that communication continues until the point where he either encourages her to send naked photos, at which point she doesn't realize it, but he owns her now. Because if she doesn't do what his romance dictates, if that's not working after a while, then he tells her he's going to extort her. And I'm going to send these photographs to your parents. I'm going to send them to your friends. I'm going to send them to the guy at school. But as long as the romantic approach works, you know, you get more with honey than vinegar sometimes. He'll tell her, you know what? I know you're 14, but when you're 18, we're going to run away, and we're going to buy a house, and we're going to have a future. And that little girl is thinking about the bucolic, white picket fence, beautiful life. Her parents don't understand her. The man in her life does. And then he says to her, I'll tell you what, we need money to be able to buy that house when you're 18. I have some friends. They're not as lucky as I am. They don't have this beautiful woman like you. But if you'll have sex with my friends because they don't have a girl like you, and I don't take it as disloyal, you're doing it because you love me and because you want our future. You have sex after school for a couple of hours, we'll make a fortune in cash, and we'll be able to have that life. So that's the face of human trafficking here. That's that young girl after school doing tricks, and her parents have no idea, not because they don't care, because they don't know what to look for.
And that grooming, that's a nice word for brainwashing, basically. So, and then it gets, and oftentimes, based on what I've seen in my research on this over the years, last couple of years, is it gets to a point of possible threat. So if the love and romance starts to wither, or that young person starts to realize this just isn't right, and that groomer, the drug human trafficker, would say, I would imagine, say, listen, if you don't do this, I know where you live. Your brother goes to that school. Your mom, dad works here. I'll hurt your family. So she tries to protect her family also, correct?
Exactly.
In that way.
That's why I say that first naked picture, he owns her, because he's either going to continue on the I love you and you're doing this for us, or, oh, you're not going to do it anymore? Well, I'll tell you what, I'm sending these photos to your parents. I'll kill you or your parents. And what does a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old girl do? She reacts with her heart, and she will do anything for this guy. And then you know how he further owns her? He then starts giving her drugs, because you see, human trafficking, this heinous crime, is also the confluence between not only the trafficking and the sex, but drugs, guns, gangs, money laundering. It's all right there, and it's all behind the curtain.
I know we just ran the piece on the federal investigators being involved. So it seems like it's almost not overwhelming. It could overwhelm a local police department, no matter how qualified they are, because they may have connections in other parts of the world or country, whatever, and they don't have the resources to investigate this kind of stuff.
And that's why I brought the feds in. That clip is from 2023.
Right, almost 2 years ago.
When nobody was really talking about it. And in a rural, beautiful, bucolic place like Wyoming County, it's hard to convince people that a problem like this exists. So what did I do? I enlisted my friends in the federal government from my White House days. You know, I was at the White House on the grounds on 9/11 and worked as part of creating what is now Homeland Security. I knew that DHS's Homeland Security investigations, it's like a second FBI. It's the second largest investigative agency in the country. I knew that they had a priority of human trafficking. Shame on me if I didn't engage those friends. So we quietly, a year before October of 23, back in 22, quietly organized our task force effort. And just like human traffickers work in the shadows, we were working in the shadows so that we could build cases and that we could work with law enforcement and then use that as a platform to then venture forth in the public to begin to educate. I think important too, Andy, is you saw the SAC, the special agent in charge of Homeland Security for the entire state of Pennsylvania, based in Philadelphia. You saw him talking about not just law enforcement, but rescuing victims. If we're going to attract this problem, we know how to catch the bad guys in law enforcement, but we also need to care for those victims, those survivors of human trafficking. We have to not only extract them from that situation, but we have to then be able to plug them into services, that trauma-informed care, a place to live, how to survive thereafter. So it's a huge challenge.
I'm getting the wrap sign for a quick break from Allison Price and Gabrielle Baker, our producers here today. We're going to come back and talk more about human trafficking. It's a fascinating topic. And again, I've covered law enforcement for years and decades here. Honestly, I could count on less than 2 hands how many human trafficking arrests I've covered over the first, say, 40 years. But over the last couple of years, it's changed because there's more awareness, I think. Okay, Joe, we'll be right back with Joe Peters, Wyoming County DA. And welcome back, Andy Mehalshick from 2822 News. My special guest today is Joe Peters, Wyoming County District Attorney, who wears many hats, investigates all kinds of crimes, and really has, I dare say, taken the bull by the horns with human trafficking in not just Wyoming County, but northeastern Pennsylvania, bringing the feds in, a wide group of educators, investigators into a problem that, as you said at the outset, out of sight, out of mind for many people. How big of a factor is that out of sight, out of mind? I know when people see this podcast or we do stories on it, we get reaction like, really? Is that going on? They can't believe it, Joe.
50 million Americans were trafficked last year in this country.
50 million.
50 million. Let me give you another number. It's a $150 billion industry. And then when you lay over the top of that the other crimes that we talked about earlier, you know, the drugs, the guns, the gangs, and we didn't even mention CSAM, which is child sexual exploitation materials, the production and distribution of those, which is a subpart or a sister to this human trafficking program. It's an enormous problem. So if it's that big in this country, you know that in one of the largest states, Pennsylvania, and the fact that we are the confluence in northeastern Pennsylvania of so many highways. We have 81, we have 80, we have the Turnpike, we have an international airport. We are a 2-hour drive from Philadelphia, 2 hours from New York.
Right.
That makes us prime because human trafficking doesn't exist unless there are customers. And we can talk about why we need to focus on those customers. But that provides an enormous customer base here in northeastern Pennsylvania.
And again, the fact, this goes back in almost every aspect of our life in northeastern PA, the fact that 80 and 81, literally the world passes through northeastern Pennsylvania, Luzerne, Wyoming counties every day. We're going to run a piece, Joe, from November of last year. You had a discussion and a training session involving former or survivors of human trafficking who are now out there spraying the word and saying, here's what's going on. And let's run that piece we'll talk about, okay?
Sure.
If I can save just one life with my story, everything that I have been through is worth it.
Kelly Alsobrook is a survivor turned training specialist and activist. She works with Truckers Against Trafficking. Alsobrook shared her story for more than 200 people at Tuesday's regional training program organized by the NEPA Task Force Against Human Trafficking. The conference helps professionals better identify and combat the ongoing epidemic. Experts say it's a crime where victims are often hiding in plain sight, places like hotels, grocery stores, and even rest stops.
Is that person able to look you in the eye? Does that person have any bruises on them? Are they fearful? Or do they come off extremely brash?
The setting of rural Wyoming County emphasized that human trafficking can take place anywhere, and anyone can fall victim.
What we're seeing more and more is elders. We're seeing adult children moving into their parents' homes, taking over their homes, putting their parents out to work, sex and labor. And the parents will never admit to anybody that's happening.
Deborah Holbrook is the director of forensic nursing for the city of Baltimore. She works directly with victims.
These are our neighbors. These are the children in our communities. These are the kids we're teaching in school. They're our patient. They're people you know.
Tuesday's event serves as a reminder when it comes to helping victims. Compassion and collaboration go a long way.
Well, you know, Joe, that really, when you talk about, again, all these pieces have a different angle. You say, really? Not that it's hard to believe, but it's happening in plain sight. And she was talking about how have compassion. So expound on that, the educational angle, the informational perspective of this. I mean, because law enforcement, you can say kick doors down, whatever, but they have to know where to go. And the public can play a big part in that, obviously.
We in law enforcement, know how to do the tough on crime part of this. And we talked about that with the law enforcement task force. The smart on crime part is just as important in two ways. One, it helps us to prevent, through education and awareness, this crime from happening in the first place. I mean, think about it. The more we can educate kids in schools and warn them about grooming so that they become more aware that maybe this new friend of mine on Facebook is actually not a friend of mine. Maybe it's an older man trying to groom me. The other part of this, and where the Northeast PA Task Force Against Human Trafficking is so good, is it is victim-centric. The focus is on the victim, or as we call them now more appropriately, the survivor, because they've come through hell, literally. They've been abused sexually. They've probably gotten themselves forced to be addicted to drugs. They're scared for themselves and their family, and they see no way out but other than being a sex slave. So that's why you'll see nurses involved with us, forensic nurses who are trained in trauma-informed care, just like victim support specialists are, so that we can extract that survivor, and we can put her on the road to survival and to a future and her family, and get her back out of that hell that she was in for too long.
I would imagine that, and correct me if you're wrong, but if I'm wrong with this, but are some, or if not many, of the victims found out or spotted because they may go to a hospital for a routine, or something happened. They had to go see a medical professional who, just by their daily, based on their training and what they see every day, they realize something just isn't right here. You know, whether it be bruises or just even the whole mental perspective. That person, it's almost like if you abuse anything, there's got to be some sign. And these professionals can pick that out and maybe take the next step and say, I think this might be happening here, or talk to that person.
Exactly. That's where the training of those various professionals becomes so important, because when you think about this, there are few places where that survivor, that woman, that girl who's being trafficked, is ever left alone.
Right.
She's never going to say something in front of her trafficker. She knows she will be beaten or killed. She knows her family will see retribution for her actions. So think about where she might be alone, and we focus on those places. The ER, if there's an injury, if there's a problem, she's going to be alone in that examination with a nurse or with the doctor who could be her lifeline. And sometimes she's still afraid to say something, but if that nurse is trained, a sane trained nurse, SANE, to focus on these kinds of situations, that nurse might allow her to open up by saying, are you okay? Or maybe more boldly, are you being trafficked? Are you being forced to do something you don't want to? And that would bring such relief, because now that young girl sees that lifeline, that person she can reach out to physically, and that person can get her out of the situation. How about a restroom in a truck stop? Truck stop is a great place for human trafficking, and I don't mean great in a good way.
Right.
It's an incubator for crime at times. So how about the restroom in a truck stop? If we can put a sign in there, if we could put a phone number in there where that woman, if she has her cell phone, and maybe she doesn't if that trafficker is smart enough to keep it from her, she can make a quick call in there and let people know where she is and what the situation is. And maybe, just maybe, we can get to her in time.
And more times than not, Joe, these situations, I would imagine, end or could end, but many end in a violent way, whether it be a murder or a beating or whatever, and these traffickers take off and leaving the person maybe for dead, and they survive, but there's not much left psychologically or physically because they're destroyed.
Physically and mentally. And to the trafficker, and sadly to the John, and by John I mean the person who's buying those services, these young girls are disposable commodities. And to the human trafficker, unlike the drug trafficker has to give you a new dose of drugs every time because you use it and it's gone. The human trafficker, sadly, has this reusable commodity, sex after sex after sex in that same little girl, day after day, night after night, sometimes all day and all night. Weeks turn into months, turn into, in that little mind, forever.
And I'm sure there are people watching this, and I think at one point or another, many of us have seen news reports or have done reports or have heard things and said, in the old days, Nancy Reagan said, "Just say no," and that was back in the '80s, of course. But this, whether it be drugs or human trafficking, it's just not a matter of saying, "I've done it, I'm walking away," even if they think they can survive or get protection, right? I mean, it's just not that easy to say, "I'm done with this," because they're brainwashed or the fear factor.
Right. Even if in the substance use disorder scenario, drugs or alcohol, you could walk away from that. It's difficult, but you're in charge. You cannot walk away from a human trafficker, typically a male with a gun, who already has you addicted, who won't let you go anywhere alone, who talks for you. You're not allowed to speak. That's why if we can train, see something, say something, we say it
with everything.
Since 9/11, we
Right.
say it about everything. It is equally as important in this situation. And we train law enforcement now too, because everybody is eyes and ears that we wouldn't otherwise have. So if you might say, "Oh, I'm a patrol officer, or I'm a trooper, and I'm working traffic, or I'm working the turnpike. How can I help in this situation?" Well, you might see something that nobody else is going to see. You might pull a car over for speeding, and then you look in that car, and if you're trained, you will spot the fact that, wait a minute, the two older men in the front are very different than that young girl in the back, whether in language or ethnicity or accent. And the girl in the back is 14 years old, and she's alone, and these two 50-year-olds are in the front, and the girl in the back has a brand new phone next to her and a credit card. Maybe there are condoms on the seat of the car because nobody expected this car to be stopped. And just like we taught troopers on the road to look for indicators of drug trafficking when they pull a car over, the same thing holds true. And that young girl in the back can see that trooper as a lifeline, as her chance to say something if that trooper engages long enough.
Joe, you and I go way back. We talk about, I remember the days back in the 90s, we did again, when no one talked about gangs, we went to some seedy neighborhood in Philadelphia to do a gang story. And the neighborhood was scary. And I never forget folks saying to Joe, this is 30 years ago, "We safe here? Are we okay?" I mean, because there were gangsters all around it. I mean, you could say it was a bad neighborhood. I feel sorry for the good people in that neighborhood, but they took over that neighborhood. Right. So these drug traffickers, I'm not making light of it, just sort of like they know what they own, right? They own that person, and they own a territory. They own an area. I'll come back with that, answer that question. Have you answer that question? We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back on 2822 News live TV app. Here we go. And welcome back to 2822 News. Andy Mehalshick along with Joe Peters, Wyoming County District Attorney. I said before, Joe wears many hats. He worked in several White Houses on both sides of the aisle, a federal investigator. Have to check out our other podcast on the mob in northeastern Pennsylvania, past and present. That was a fascinating thing also. But just to make the point that Joe Peters has been around the block and he has seen a lot of good, the bad, and the ugly all over Pennsylvania and around the country. We're talking about human trafficking today. And I'll be honest with you, I still, in my mind, it's like, how could this happen? You know, as you said before, drug dealers, they're on the corner. You know, arsonists throw fire bombs, you eventually see them on camera. But human trafficking is still, in the, I think, general public, under the radar. How important is education? Expand on that, education. And also, do these human traffickers have a territory? Do they have a region, or is it just pretty much haphazard?
Anybody in a gang or in a cartel or in an activity where you have a number of people, they all try to control their territory. But you don't get the fighting as you might, in the streets of Philadelphia, where certain gangs control certain corners when it comes to drug trafficking. Because there are endless opportunities to traffic your young women for the trafficking organization. Think about the number of hotels that exist in any town, Pennsylvania, in any community, in any region. Think about just traveling the interstates and the number of rest stops, not to mention hotels clustered around each exit. Think about sporting events. Places and entities and events like the Super Bowl become some of the biggest meccas for human trafficking. Wherever you have men congregating and wherever you have money and where you have people away from home, it makes it easy for the John to justify doing this, and it makes it the perfect place. We talked about truck stops. Let's talk about malls. Wherever there are people, you're going to bring your product, and in this case, sadly, it's a young girl, to that customer base.
Let's talk. We're going to run another piece. It's called the Red. We talked about awareness, public awareness, the Red Sand Project. Until this day, I think more people are obviously aware of what it means and what it's all about, but I think it makes really a key point because, well, let's run this piece. We'll talk about it. Okay, Joe? Here we go. Allison
Those
and
walking
Gabby.
around downtown Scranton might be seeing red sand poured in the cracks in the sidewalk. The sand is not graffiti, but a representative of victims of human trafficking who fell through the cracks.
The sand is in the cracks to make sure no children fall through the cracks. We're hoping that, the more information, the more education we bring to the public, the less children will fall through those cracks.
The Red Sand Project is a national movement started by artist Molly Gauckman in 2014. The project has been held here annually for a couple years. One organizer tells us this is their biggest collective movement. Lackawanna County's DA says those who joined the effort are a committed crew.
They're very dedicated, selfless individuals who really have a passion to help people. Trauma service providers, children and youth, law enforcement. We can't do our job unless all these people come to the table and help us.
Others at the event tell us their line of work deals with profound sadness, and to be able to participate in something like this means the world to them.
All this stuff happens in the darkness. No one sees it. It's not out there publicly, and we're trying to bring it to light because the notion and people's thoughts of what is human trafficking is different than what it actually is.
Organizers hope the Red Sand will help people become more aware of those who are affected by human trafficking.
I hope everyone feels a sense of community and empowerment. I hope people can look at this sand and realize that this is happening right on our streets, right where we live.
Colby Hughes, 2822 News.
And that was just at the end of July in Scranton. And, and when the story ran, then people would say, well, that's sort of silly putting a red sand in the crack of sidewalks, right? What's that all about? And I said to that person, but you're talking about it, aren't you? You're asking me that question, whether it be critical or rhetorical or whatever, you're asking me that question. So it worked, right? They went, listen, I'm not a smart guy. But that even was obvious for me,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Now, we'll talk about the Red Sand Project, but first of all, how key is it to get the word out? Those kind of projects, as benign as they seem, right? And we run it on the air. Now we're talking about it on a podcast. It's on our social media. Other media outlets are out there, hopefully. How important is that kind of a project, that kind of an effort?
Enormously important. If I told you how many people asked me, what does it mean? And then the red sand in the cracks. And then that opens the door to explaining what it means. And before you realize it, you're in a dialogue and you're educating someone. The red sand, depicts someone who has fallen through the cracks, and sending that message that we don't want one child to fall through the cracks, but it happens over and over. It also sort of emphasizes the importance of our partners in this. Entities like Children and Youth, entities like the Children's Advocacy Center, which does just such extraordinary work in handling that survivor, in interviewing in a forensic interview environment that child, because a 12-year-old is a child, so that they don't have to go through multiple interviews. At the CAC, you have one interview, and you have behind a glass, so that child is not intimidated, law enforcement, counselors, mental health professionals, physical health professionals, and you have all of those people there to care for that person, who then just has to do one interview, and everyone then can extract from that interview what they need. The investigators can take what they need. The victim specialist can take what they need. The trauma-informed care people can take what they need. Children and youth can take what they need. So in one place, we are caring for that victim, and as I mentioned earlier, putting them back on the road to a healthy life again.
And the CACs, Joan, just to expound, just to also give them kudos. We've done many stories over the years, not that many because they have to be, of course, confidential. They deal with children, but the work they do, you're right. I mean, over the years, if there was an investigation into a child abuse claim, we knew they were talked to by the initial police officers, then maybe county detectives, then children and youth, or a doctor in between there. There's 4 or 5 layers to it.
They're re-victimized.
And re-victimized.
Every time they tell the story, they're re-traumatized.
Right.
That's why we even train our law enforcement officers now, even in that initial response to the scene, this notion of trauma-informed therapy, that there's a way to talk to someone who has been through a trauma so that you can better help them and better help yourself in the investigation, because they're not going to recoil from you, because they get the fact that you understand. You're not asking questions that scare them or put them off or confuse them. You're getting the same information, but your approach is different, and you're getting it in a way that is more welcoming to that victim, that survivor, because they know that you care, and you're saying things that let them know that.
And that trust factor we talked about at the beginning of this program, the brainwashing impact in the beginning, the brainwash. I'll take care of you, I love you, whatever. And and psychologically, they're kids. I don't care if they're 15, 14, 16. They're not fully developed. They don't have life's journey. They haven't been through the battles of life or struggles. Hopefully more celebrations than struggles, but we all go through it in one way or another. So they don't have that foundation of, is this good or bad? So they could be easily manipulated. But also that deprogramming, that's got to be such a challenge. When I hear the word, what does forensic mean? I have a better understanding after covering things for all these years of what that really means, how you conduct the interview, what you're looking for. It's not just coming out and saying, hey, were you abused by that guy?
Right. And being sensitive to the trauma that they have experienced. You mentioned a key word, which is trust. You see in these crimes that broken trust is at the heart of how human trafficking develops. Broken trust of that guy that you thought was the 19-year-old man of your dreams who turned out to be a 50-year-old predator. That trust is broken. Trust you placed in that person who now turns around when you don't do what they want and threatens you and says he's going to kill you or expose you. You know what's even worse than that broken trust? Something called familial human trafficking. Families trafficking their own. Imagine trafficking
I can't even imagine it.
Your young daughter. Now, in some cases, they're criminals from the beginning, and they see that young child as a way for them to make money. In some cases, they feel like they have no other choice. If you have snuck over the border and you know you can't go to the authorities, you have to feed yourself and your family. So if there's a way, even if it means using your young daughter to make money to survive, you're going to do that. And then what happens to that young child? She grows up thinking this is okay. This is daddy's business. How sad and sick, but it's true. That child rationalizes that I'm helping my family by doing this. So I'm having sex, but it's feeding my brothers and sisters. The parent is saying she's having sex with strangers, but she's helping feed our family. And imagine that psychological turmoil in the mind of that 12 or 14-year-old girl.
We've heard a lot of talk about the open border, what we're seeing, and there's, I guess, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not more, children unaccounted for that they believe are either being trafficked by strangers or their own family out there somewhere. I mean, how do you possibly track these kids down?
Imagine the tens of thousands of children that are separated from their parents crossing the border, and no one knows where they are. Or in some cases, it was the very trafficker who put his name on the armband of that little child. So when she crossed the border, this was her family in the U.S. Just call them, and they'll come and take care of her. It's that damn trafficker who's coming to pick up his commodity that he's going to traffic.
Now we're talking about, of course, more the younger adults, children, younger adults. Are we seeing it in full-blown adults, 25, 30-year-old? Because we did a story a couple of years ago, and I believe it was in the Poconos, and we had a newsmakers program actually on it a couple of years ago, and she was now 35, 40, and she was being trafficked at 20, 25. But she connected with the human trafficker. It wasn't through family or anything like that, but she was desperate for drugs or whatever, an addiction, and that's how she got involved in it. So we're seeing, obviously, adults out there also.
Yeah, adults, again, if they have a hopeless situation, or at least from their view, it's hopeless, and they have no other choice, that grooming can occur at any age. There are even senior citizens who are trafficked. Now, often that's labor trafficking, but they can also be sexually trafficked. You know, there are these Romeos out there that will groom people for sex. They will groom people to scam them. They will groom seniors to scam them out of their money. So human trafficking can happen at any age. It's just more focused on young children and, in fact, young girls. But young boys can be trafficked as well.
We're going to take it. Allison Price, Gabrielle Baker. Should we take a quick break real quick? Or not yet? Okay. What would you say to, and again, I'm sure there are many people watching this saying, one, they're having a hard time believing it's taking place, but are there any signs or any kind of clues that they should look out for? Hopefully programs like this bring awareness to it, but what should they look out for in their own neighborhoods? It doesn't matter if it's wherever neighborhood it is. Are there anything they could look out for, maybe with a family member or a friend or a neighbor that might be a warning sign, or is it that underground that they may not notice anything?
You'll notice something, and you don't have to be a highly trained professional to notice differences that are concerning. If you're a 12 or 13-year-old little girl has been a pretty happy-go-lucky, focused child doing well in school with friends and involved in activities, and all of a sudden there's a dramatically different or even a subtly different change in her behavior, if she's more withdrawn, there's something wrong. If you see marks on her, there's something wrong. If you see tattoos, human traffickers are very famous for putting tattoos on their victims or encouraging their victims to put tattoos. And what traffickers do is they create this competition within the girls that they traffic. So you might, if you're the trafficker, you might have 3 or 4 young girls. They may have your name tattooed. It may even say property of. It may say daddy. Now, how sick is daddy as a tattoo on the arm of a victim? Because daddy doesn't mean her father. it means her trafficker. There's a term called the bottom. The bottom is one of the women in the organization that controls the other girls for the trafficker. These young girls are so brainwashed, they want to be the, quote, bottom. They want to be the one in charge. The trafficker will create competitions among his girls that whoever turns the most tricks at the hotel tonight gets to sleep in bed with daddy while the others are on the floor sleeping or turning tricks and not eating. That's the sickness and the heinous nature of this crime.
What message, if any, Joe, does law enforcement say, for example, hotel operators, managers, rest stop or truck stop areas? People aren't stupid. They know when something just isn't right, okay? But if they turn their head and look the other way, or maybe they're afraid to get involved, what do you want to say to those folks who are fully aware of what's going on in behind the truck stop or the hotel, right? You know, I can think of some local place I won't mention at this point that I'm pretty confident are prime targets or location for this kind of activity, okay? What do you want to say to the owners of those businesses who know things are going on, but at this point, I'm not getting involved. I believe, for whatever reason, not that they're being paid off or condone it, but I'm just not getting involved. What do you want to say to those folks?
Shame on you, because that could be your daughter or your granddaughter. And you don't have to, quote, get involved to help. You can just make a call. You can call in to a tip line. You can send an email to a tip line. That's that saying something part that follows see something. And as far as the business people, we work with them. There are a lot of hotels that want no part of this in their establishment. And we can educate their housekeepers. If you're a housekeeper and you go into a room and you see a young girl with two older guys and you see condoms and makeup and multiple credit cards, something is wrong. Truck stops, truckers against trafficking are our friends in this. Because 99% of the truckers are good people, hardworking, CDL toting
They're professionals.
drivers.
They're
Exactly.
professionals, yeah.
They don't want this reputation on them as an industry or as a driving professional. So they are our eyes and ears in truck stops. So truckers against trafficking, and everybody in every industry can do that.
We're going to take a short break. Joe Peters, Wyoming County District Attorney. We're talking about human trafficking in northeastern Pennsylvania and beyond. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with some final thoughts.